Picture this. It's June 28th, 1914. A young man steps out of a deli in Sarajevo after a failed assassination attempt earlier that morning. He's frustrated. He thinks the mission is over. But then, by pure accident, the royal motorcade takes a wrong turn. The car stalls, and Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria is sitting right there, 3 feet away. One shot, and the world goes to war. That's the story you were probably taught in school. One bullet, one dead Archduke, one world war. But here's the question nobody asks. How does one assassination in a city most people couldn't find on a map drag 30 nations into 4 years of the bloodiest war in human history? The answer isn't what you think. And once you understand the real reason World War I started, you'll never look at politics, alliances, or international power the same way again.
Ask anyone on the street why World War I started, and you'll get the same answer. A Serbian guy shot Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and that caused the war. This is the version taught in textbooks across the world, and it's not entirely wrong, but it is dangerously incomplete. The standard story goes like this. Gavrilo Princip, a Bosnian Serb nationalist, assassinated Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia. Serbia refused to comply fully with Austrian demands. Austria declared war on Serbia. And then, like dominoes, everyone else joined in.
Under this version of history, the war was essentially an accident, a tragedy of miscalculation. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong trigger. Many historians have even called it a war that nobody really wanted. That phrase became famous. It painted world leaders as helpless victims of circumstance, pulled into a conflict they stumbled into rather than chose. This version is comforting in a strange way. It means no one was really to blame. It was just bad luck, a wrong turn on a Sarajevo street. But that version ignores decades of deliberate planning, imperial ambition, secret military timetables, and calculated political decisions made long before that gun was ever fired.
Here's what was actually happening underneath the surface. Europe was a powder keg, built on purpose. By 1914, Europe had divided itself into 2 massive armed camps. On one side, the Triple Entente, Britain, France, and Russia. On the other, the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. These weren't just diplomatic friendships. These were military commitments. If one country went to war, every country attached to it was legally and strategically obligated to follow. This system didn't happen by accident. It was the result of 40 years of deliberate alliance building, largely driven by one man, Otto von Bismarck, Germany's Iron Chancellor. Bismarck had actually designed a careful, balanced system to prevent major European war after Prussia's victory over France in 1871. But after Kaiser Wilhelm II forced Bismarck out in 1890, Germany began pursuing a far more aggressive foreign policy, and the alliance system spiraled out of control. The arms race nobody talks about. Between 1870 and 1914, European military spending increased by over 300%. Germany alone doubled its army in the decade before the war. Britain and Germany were locked in a fierce naval arms race, both nations building dreadnought battleships at record speed. By 1914, Germany had the most powerful land army in the world, and Britain had the most powerful navy. These weren't defensive measures. They were preparations. Everyone was getting ready for a war they assumed was inevitable. The question wasn't if, it was when and who goes first. The Schlieffen Plan, a war already scheduled. Here's something most people have never heard of: the Schlieffen Plan. As early as 1905, Germany's military had already drawn up a detailed plan for fighting a 2-front war against France and Russia simultaneously. The plan required Germany to invade France through neutral Belgium as fast as possible, knock France out of the war in 6 weeks, then swing all forces east to fight Russia. This plan had a critical flaw.
It had to be activated the moment war looked likely. Once Russia began mobilizing its army, Germany's military commanders told Kaiser Wilhelm II they had no choice but to launch the Schlieffen Plan immediately or lose the war before it started. So when Austria declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914, and Russia began mobilizing to defend Serbia, Germany didn't pause to negotiate. The millenary machine was already in motion. The war was no longer a political decision. It became a logistical timetable.
Colonial competition and imperial rivalry. Underneath all of this was something even deeper: imperial competition. By 1914, Britain, France, and Germany were all competing for colonies, trade routes, and global dominance. Britain controlled a quarter of the world's land. France had a massive African and Asian empire. Germany, which had only unified as a nation in 1871, felt it had arrived late to the imperial feast and wanted its share. Kaiser Wilhelm II famously declared Germany deserved a place in the sun. German industrialization had made it economically powerful, arguably stronger than Britain in manufacturing by 1900. But Germany lacked colonies, naval bases, and international influence proportional to its economic strength. This created deep resentment and deep ambition. War wasn't just about Franz Ferdinand. It was about who would dominate the 20th century.
The evidence for this deeper picture is overwhelming, and it comes from the archives of the nations involved. The Fischer controversy. In 1961, German historian Fritz Fischer published Griff nach der Weltmacht, Germany's Aims in the First World War. After studying classified German government documents, Fischer argued that Germany had deliberately pushed for war in 1914 as part of a long-term strategy for European and global dominance. The book caused a political earthquake in West Germany. Fischer was accused of being a traitor, but his research, based on primary government documents, has been largely confirmed by subsequent historians. The July Crisis documents. Declassified diplomatic communications from July 1914 show that Austria-Hungary was encouraged by Germany to make demands on Serbia so harsh they could not possibly be accepted. Germany gave Austria what historians call a blank check, unconditional military support, knowing it would likely start a wider war. This was not miscalculation. It was a calculated green light.
The Schlieffen Plan. The original document exists in German military archives. Field Marshal Alfred von Schlieffen wrote it in 1905. It proves that Germany had detailed operational war plans specifically requiring the invasion of neutral Belgium years before any assassination. British naval records. British Admiralty documents show Britain had been planning for a war with Germany since at least 1906, including secret staff talks with France that Parliament was never told about. Britain was not dragged in unwillingly. Senior military and naval planners had been preparing for this war for years.
Now here's the part that will genuinely surprise you. Gavrilo Princip almost didn't kill Franz Ferdinand at all. That morning, the original assassination attempt had already failed. A grenade thrown at Franz Ferdinand's car bounced off and exploded under the next vehicle. The assassination team scattered. Princip, believing the mission had failed, walked into a nearby deli, some accounts say a cafe or sandwich shop, genuinely dejected. He came out minutes later, and by a freak coincidence, Franz Ferdinand's royal motorcade had made a wrong turn. The driver was told at the last minute to change the route to visit the hospital where those injured in the grenade explosion were being treated. The car stalled while reversing, right in front of Princip. He was so close, he didn't even need to aim properly.
Now, here's the deeper twist. Franz Ferdinand was actually one of the least popular figures in Austrian military and political circles. He was known to favor a more federated Austro-Hungarian empire that would give Slavic people more rights, which was opposed by Serbian nationalist groups like the Black Hand that organized the assassination. In a bizarre historical irony, the man murdered to stop Slavic integration was one of the few Austro-Hungarian leaders who actually supported it. Some historians have even argued that had Franz Ferdinand lived and eventually become emperor,
the war might never have happened because he was opposed to a military confrontation with Serbia. And the final twist? Italy, which was part of the Triple Alliance, refused to join Germany and Austria-Hungary when the war actually started. It declared neutrality in 1914, claiming the alliance was defensive and Austria had started an offensive war. 2 years later, Italy switched sides entirely and joined Britain and France. The alliance system everyone feared as a guarantee of war couldn't even hold itself together.
So let's bring this together. World War I did not start because of one bullet in Sarajevo. It started because of 40 years of deliberate alliance building, an arms race that made war feel inevitable, military plans that removed political choice, imperial ambition that made war feel desirable, and a chain of decisions by real human beings who chose escalation over negotiation at almost every single moment in July 1914. Gavrilo Princip pulled the trigger, but the gun had been loaded for decades. The uncomfortable truth is that World War I wasn't an accident. It was the consequence of a system that powerful nations built and then convinced themselves they couldn't control. And that lesson matters today more than ever, because the same ingredients, rival alliances, arms races, imperial competition, and rigid military planning exist in our world right now. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it does rhyme. If this video made you rethink something you thought you knew, that's exactly what this channel is for. Hit subscribe because every week we dig beneath the surface of history and find the truth that textbooks leave out. Drop a comment below. Did you know the real reasons before watching this? We read every single one. And stay curious. The real story is always more interesting than the official one.